now many videos which describe the events of 9/11. Most give far more information than is needed on subjects related but not vital to a deeper understanding. One critical aspect never shared about the World Trade Center's towers lends to an explanation showing the entire 9/11 event as a massive deception, enabling a ruse and theater of politics exploiting America. That aspect provides a feasible basis for the almost identical destruction of two 1,300-foot towers in Manhattan to the ground at rates nearly equal to free fall. It explains the pulverization of the building's contents as well as the superfine dust blanketing the city. The official explanation of damage from plane impacts and fire do not account for what was seen and heard, nor does it explain the physical evidence of the aftermath seen in the images of Ground Zero. It does not account for the pulverization and the massive particulate that rose and spread over the city of New York. This video will explain these events, how they were caused, after exposing the deceptions that make the events of 9/11 at the World Trade Center so difficult to understand. The official analysis begins with the tower design depicted in this diagram. As ludicrous as it sounds, this diagram is about the only official depiction of the core of the towers in existence. That diagram depicts a core comprised of multiple steel core columns. It is a deception. The core that actually existed and can be seen in images of 9/11 was a steel-reinforced cast concrete tube. This was originally an official diagram that I have revised to represent the concrete core of WTC-1. The lower half only had one hallway in one direction per floor. WTC-2 was different, with two halls in each direction per floor. Here is another image showing how the BBC thinks the tower's core is configured. We all know this is wrong because there is no place for elevators and stairs in the small, solid core shown. The image shows a post-stressed concrete design eliminated by Minoru Yamasaki, the certifying architect, who found no contractor would commit to being able to build a post-stressed core 1,300 foot tall. There are many text descriptions of steel core columns, but no images where it is certain what is seen are core columns. What is seen are misrepresentations of construction photos. This image is commonly thought to show core columns. It does not. The vertical steel seen is actually elevator guide rail support steel, which can be identified by the butt plates welded to the ends of the steel. The plates facilitate bolting the ends of two support sections together. While this is adequate for elevator guide rail support steel, which will only see compressional loads, it will not take any lateral load. Only a 100% fillet weld butting two heavy box columns together has the strength to be termed a core column. No image from 9/11 shows steel columns in the core area. The images you will see in this documentary are the images that would show the steel core columns if they did exist. They did not. There were columns, but as can be seen with this overlay, they were not in the core area. They were outside of it. No columns are seen inside the core. The columns which did exist surrounded the concrete core and were fastened to it. They were called interior box columns, referring to their position as part of the inner wall of the outer tube of the tube in a tube construction. This image, taken from a helicopter of the top floor, has been annotated, labeling the columns massive box columns. Whoever annotated the image was accurate in that the vertical steel inside the core area is much smaller and is the elevator guide rail support steel further up in the construction. The concrete core was being cast up to 80 feet below the top floor. It was the inner tube. The tower core was a steel-reinforced cast concrete rectangular tube, the inner tube of the tube in a tube construction. Here is the lower half of the WTC-2 standing after the outer tube. The steel framework bearing the floors has fallen away. No steel core columns are visible. First, the method of destruction must be established. This is no collapse, and it is not an ordinary controlled demolition. The uniformity of the high-speed series of explosions and the resulting particulate are unusually refined. These towers were built to demolish as engineered concrete containers for high explosives. This is the only explanation which accounts for all the factors of the event. The particle size and quantity are conclusive evidence that forbid interpretation as collapse. Indeed, the application of the term collapse is an affront to logic and our extensive experience as television viewers of excessive violence. The spire is an element of the towers well known by the 9/11 truth community. This sequence will show the formation of the spire. The first image is an immense explosion which actually heaves concrete debris onto the roof of WTC 7, which is across the street from WTC 1. In the upper part of the image, we can see the spire first appearing. The next image is too low a resolution to show the spire, but it does show a huge triangular piece of concrete from the eastern wall of the tower's core falling into the core area. The spire is the northwest corner of the framework outside the core of WTC 1. This is heavy structural steel, and the floor beams forming rectangular frames identify those frames as the same as what is seen in the helicopter photos and labeled massive box columns. No steel columns are seen in the core area. Another view of the spire, as seen from the northeast, shows the core wall behind the interior box columns, but that is not easily seen. Again, no steel core columns are seen to the left of the spire in the core area. This image shows the western wall of WTC 1. The heavy steel column is on the right. The wall is seen in an end view as we look south along the western wall. This is 400 plus feet off the ground. The broken end of concrete is unmistakable. Again, no steel core columns are seen. The built-to-demolish scenario was accomplished with plastic explosives in 2 explosive circuits and reduced all of the concrete to sand and gravel. One circuit was comprised of the plastic explosive coating the high tensile steel rebar of the concrete core walls. The other explosive circuit had the same plastic explosive in the corrugations of the floor panels. The floor circuits were detonated first, while the concrete walls of the core protected the detonation circuits of the core, which were located inside the core. Security phone lines located on each floor and in the core we used to distribute one signal to many digital counters to start them all counting at once to detonate at different times. 75 milliseconds more count for each floor downward and 300 milliseconds for every 40 feet of core creates a rate of free fall to the ground. The plastic explosive was encapsulated in concrete, which prevented evaporation and oxidization, or preserved the viability of the explosives for decades. This image is taken immediately following the fall of the major spire already seen. The images were taken from the same camera seconds apart. The latter image has an element which does not stand vertically. It leans. Light appears to shine through it. Many small elements are to the right of it and have a brush-like appearance. This is the 3-inch rebar of the concrete core walls standing after explosives which sat through winter lost their viability. Fresh horizontal rebar tied to the large vertical bar detonated, removing the concrete to leave the heavy vertical bar visible for a few seconds. This image shows a portion of the top of WTC2 falling onto WTC3. Inside the rotating, falling, narrow-spaced perimeter box columns is seen a brown-colored cube, part of the very top of the concrete core of WTC2. The concrete roof of the core is seen with dark stripes where steel I-beams cross the roof and join the perimeter walls together. The white color is from mineralization of the horizontal concrete and condensation over the years. The fact that the very top of WTC2 fell west, while the major portion of the top of the tower fell east, indicates demolition. This analysis is derived from structural information gained from a documentary on the construction of WTC-1 called The Engineering and Construction of the Twin Towers, which aired in 1990 and 91 on the PBS network. VHS copies were sold directly to the public, and certainly some copy was made from the broadcasts. This is video that is vital for our futures. Search for and find this video. Had the official description of the tower's structure been accurate and defined the steel-reinforced cast concrete core, the public would have thought, concrete does not bend and melt. How could those towers fall like that? And where are all the big pieces of concrete? The public has seen many collapsed bridges and knows that when concrete collapses, many large pieces of it are visible in the debris. Here is an image of the single large remnant of concrete left intact at Ground Zero. Cameras were confiscated there, and the mayor took the WTC documents from the city offices in December of 2001, and courts will not force their return, showing it was vital that the public not realize there was a concrete core. To the left is an interior box column, the only type columns that actually existed in the towers. To the right of it is the 12-foot thick north wall of the WTC-1 concrete core. Note the rigid coiled steel reinforcing rod protruding from the top of the concrete. This is special 6-inch high tensile steel rebar used in the foundation and extending up through the core base into the bottom core walls. Note the rounded corners of the concrete wall in this later image, which is zoomed in. Note no core columns are seen penetrating the stairwell or to the right of it where they should be. There were no steel columns in the core. At the World Trade Center, all that was left was sand and gravel. In order for the giant theater or ruse of plane impacts and fire being responsible for the towers coming down, the deception of the core was absolutely necessary. Simple planted explosives cannot be responsible. All theories presented to explain the events at the World Trade Center fail to produce evidence supporting the theories. What is presented here is a true scenario because all evidence is consistent with each theory. Free fall. Huge masses of superfine particulate forming pyroclastic flows, square, sheared columns, the entire contents of the towers pulverized, and finally the heaving of massive segments of the tower for hundreds of feet. Free fall is explained because concrete can be instantly fractured to fall freely with a small amount of high explosives which are properly placed. Steel cannot. Rebar in the center of a wall, which is an engineered explosive container, will create maximum pressures that fracture the wall while also placing enough concrete with intimate contact to the explosive to create masses of very fine particulate that is extremely heated, forming a pyroclastic flow. The square, smooth, sheared columns on the left are the typical column end. On the right, a salvage torch cut, just to show the differences. Bombs or satchel charges will leave very rough ends and require excessive amounts of high explosive to effectively cut heavy wall tube. No such cuts are seen on the ends of Ground Zero steel columns. Uncontained explosive blasts of the size needed to cut heavy steel were not seen, heard, or recorded at the WTC on 9/11.
My God! Holy shit!
What was seen, heard, and recorded were very well contained blasts having a booming or rumbling quality. Optimized cutting charges built into the floors of the towers can do exactly this. The 1990 documentary mentioned tempered steel plates with close tolerances surrounding the interior box columns. Here is a crude diagram of such a built-in optimized cutting charge utilizing tight-fitting gas guide plates. The steel plates are installed over the corrugated steel floor panels with perhaps 1 inch or so of plastic explosive between them. The plates are then encapsulated in the concrete of the floors containing the expanding gases, forming a collapsing high-pressure plane that slices through the tube walls, ejecting dark particulates skyward. Columns cut exactly like this litter Ground Zero. Here is an image of a column ruptured by a malfunctioning or overloaded cutting charge. Photos of explosions ahead of the disintegration of the upper towers show the cutting charges in the floors detonating and cutting the interior box columns. The large pieces of the tower propelled outward from the tower were caused by two aspects. 1. Failures of detonation systems or explosive circuits in the floors, or the column cutting systems exposed to air failing to detonate, such as what caused the spire seen earlier, caused large sections to remain connected. 2. Then the webs of 3-foot I-beams against the core walls acted to catch the wave of high-speed blast debris and throw the still connected perimeter box column assemblies, floors, and floor beams out into space for hundreds of feet. This engineered concrete explosive container technology was designed as Cold War self-destruct systems that were implemented in submarine bases and missile silos, and was intended to pulverize all secret technology such as guidance systems and other technological information contained in the installation. The contents of the Twin Tower offices were completely ground up, and groups of people clustered near windows to find relief from smoke were shredded as they were subjected to a 7-mile-per-second blast wave of concrete aggregates and ejected from the buildings in small pieces to land on nearby building roofs. America has a big problem with secrecy.